She was just a waitress with 5 languages and no future. Until one sentence in perfect French flipped her life upside down. Betrayed, humiliated, and nearly silenced. But when the world doubted her, she stood up in Rome and saved a billion-dollar empire. With nothing but her voice. You think you've heard stories of underdogs? You haven't seen this one. If this story moved, you don't forget to hit subscribe for more powerful true-life dramas that inspire. Drop a comment with your favorite moment and share this with someone who's ever felt underestimated. Let's give voices like Grace's the spotlight they deserve. The morning rush at Chester's Diner. A cramped little coffee shop on East 47th Street in Manhattan was the same as always loud, messy, and underpaid. Grace Miller moved like clockwork between tables, dodging spilled coffee, balancing 3 plates in one hand, and faking a smile she didn't feel. She wore the same faded black sneakers and ill-fitting apron every day, and nobody ever looked twice. To the world, she was just the help. But beneath that tired uniform was a brain fluent in 5 languages, a diploma she never hung on a wall, and a dream she'd long buried under piles of unpaid medical bills. At 8:37 a.m. the door chimed. Grace barely glanced up. Another customer. But he wasn't just another customer. He wore a tailored navy overcoat, expensive but understated. His posture screamed confidence. And when he slid into a corner booth and pulled out his phone, Grace noticed his hands didn't shake, like those of the anxious business folks who came in for drip coffee and desperation. He was calm, in control, powerful. She walked over to take his order. Before she could speak, he raised one hand and muttered something fast in French. Grace froze. He wasn't talking to her. He was on the phone, irritated, frustrated. He spoke French fluently, but too quickly for anyone around to understand. She caught bits and pieces: contract delay, Zurich, wrong figures. The tension in his voice cut through the clatter of dishes and espresso machines. A few seconds later, he said something that caught her attention. Si quelqu'un pouvait simplement m'écouter ici. If only someone here could understand me. That's when she did something no one in the diner expected. She answered. Excusez-moi, monsieur, she said clearly, her voice calm but assertive. Vous voulez que je vous aide à clarifier ça? Excuse me, sir. Would you like me to help clarify that? The entire diner seemed to go silent, like the world held its breath. The man turned to her slowly, stunned. Vous parlez français? You speak French? Grace nodded, couramment, fluently. She didn't wait for permission. She gently reached for his phone, not intrusively, but with quiet confidence, and asked in French, Who am I speaking with, sir? The man on the other end replied, shocked but relieved. Within seconds, Grace translated the key, figures confirmed, the Zurich schedule clarified, a time zone miscommunication, and even added a polite joke about airline delays, all in impeccable French. 3 minutes later, the call ended. The man, still silent, stared at her like he was trying to solve a mystery. Then he asked in English this time. What's your name, Grace? She said simply. Grace what? Grace Miller. He blinked, almost disbelieving. Where did you learn French like that? Mexico City? High school. Then the University of Chicago. I studied applied linguistics. She didn't say the rest. Full-ride scholarship, top of her class, dropped out to take care of her mom with late-stage kidney disease. That story didn't matter to customers at this diner. They only cared if she brought the toast warm. But this man wasn't just a customer. He extended his hand. Julian Carter. She hesitated, then shook it. He smiled slowly, thoughtfully, like a man realizing he just stumbled onto something rare. Julian Carter, billionaire CEO, half African-American, half French, known for being tough in the boardroom and impossible to impress. And he was looking at Grace Miller like she just cracked a code his whole team couldn't. She turned to leave. Wait, he said. Grace, are you looking for work outside this place? She paused, heart thudding. I guess that depends on what kind of work. Julian reached into his coat pocket and handed her a matte black business card. JC Group International, Global Expansion Division. My communications advisor just quit. I'm interviewing replacements this week. He tilted his head, curious. Ever considered using your voice for something bigger? Grace stared at the card, then at Julian. The buzz of the diner returned. The coffee burned. Orders were shouted, dishes clanged. But Grace Miller's world had already changed, and neither of them knew it yet, but that one conversation in a cramped New York diner was about to flip their lives upside down. Julian Carter didn't usually lose sleep over people, but that night he barely blinked. After walking out of Chester's diner with Grace's name still echoing in his mind, he called in his assistant and said just 2 words: "Find her." 24 hours later, he had the file. Grace Miller, age 27, born in El Paso, Texas, Mexican-American, graduated top of her class in applied linguistics at the University of Chicago. Fluent in English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Italian. Had been offered a scholarship to Oxford University. She never went, dropped out just 6 months before departure. Reason. Julian's brows furrowed. Her mother, Linda Miller, diagnosed with late-stage kidney failure. Grace stayed behind to care for her, worked double shifts, then gave up her grad school entirely. 5 years later, Grace was still waiting tables. And something else, 3 interviews at global firms, all rejections. She had the resume, the degrees, but never the look. One HR note read, "Doesn't fit our image for external-facing roles." Julian stared at that line for a long time. By 10 a.m. the next morning, he walked into Chester's again. This time, Grace saw him coming. Her heart rate doubled, but her steps stayed steady. "I was hoping you'd be here," he said, sliding into a booth like he'd never left. Grace raised an eyebrow. "You're back for more burnt toast. I'm here for you." She blinked. "Excuse me." Julian pulled out a tablet and placed it on the table screen, unlocked. Her profile stared back at her. "You were a candidate for Oxford?" he asked. Grace's jaw clenched. "I didn't go." "I know why," Julian said gently, "but the world doesn't." Her throat tightened. "I have a meeting in 2 days," he continued, "with a French investor. I need someone who speaks business French, not textbook French. Someone who understands nuance. Someone like you." Grace shook her head instinctively. "No, I can't." "Why not?" She looked away. "My mom's not well. I can't leave her. She depends on me. And even if I could, people like me don't belong in your world." Julian leaned forward. "People like you. What does that even mean?" Grace hesitated, then spoke quietly, but firmly. "It means girls from small border towns don't end up negotiating in glass towers. It means waitresses with brown skin and student debt don't get picked to sit next to CEOs in boardrooms. And it means—" She stopped herself. Too much, too real. Julian didn't flinch. "You're wrong," he said. "People like you are exactly who should be in the room." Silence. Then Grace said the words that were heavier than they sounded. "I'll think about it." That night at their tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, Grace helped her mother into bed. The machines beeped softly beside her, a constant reminder of how fragile life was. "I saw you talking to someone today," her mother said. Grace paused. "He came back. The Frenchman." She nodded. "He offered me a job, just one meeting. I'd translate." Her mother's face darkened. "Absolutely not. Mom, no, Grace. You don't belong in that world. You think they see you as an equal? They'll use you, chew you up, spit you out. You are not safe there." Grace felt the words like daggers, not because they were cruel, but because they were soaked in fear. Linda gripped her hand. "Please, stay where it's safe. I'd rather be sick and have you beside me than see you hurt by people who pretend to respect you." At 3:12 a.m., Grace sat on the floor of their small kitchen, head in her hands, between dream and duty, between what she could be and who she was expected to remain. She opened her old college folder. Her Oxford acceptance letter was still there, yellowed at the edges, but intact. She looked at the numbers on her mom's hospital invoice. $14,728, and then at the card Julian had left behind. Matt Black, Minimalist. Julian Carter, JC Group, Global Expansion Division. She grabbed her phone, opened a new text. To Julian Carter, message, "I'll be there." What time? She didn't hit send. Not yet. The next morning, Julian sat at his office overlooking Midtown when his phone buzzed. Message from Grace Miller. "I'll be there." What time? He smiled. What Grace didn't know was that this meeting would not only change her life, It would reveal a side of her strength even she didn't know she had. And the world. The world was about to meet the woman they all overlooked. Grace stood outside the revolving glass doors of Carter & Company Global Headquarters, her palms slightly sweaty, her stomach tight. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something heavier, the pressure of carrying both her dream and her mother's doubt into the same room. Julian met her in the lobby, sharp in a slate gray suit, exuding his usual calm power. But when he saw her crisp navy blazer, minimal makeup hair tied back, he smiled in a way that said, "You're not the same woman from the diner. You're the version the world tried to bury." "You ready?" he asked. "No," Grace admitted, "but I'm here." He gave a small nod. "That's enough." Inside the 28th floor boardroom, the atmosphere was already tense. 3 French investors, veterans of the luxury real estate world, sat at one end of the table. Their lead, Monsieur Bernard Lefebvre, a man in his 60s with a permanent scowl and 3 Rolexes on one wrist, barely looked up when Julien walked in. Julien introduced himself. Grace stood silently beside him. Lefebvre didn't shake hands. "So, you expect us to trust an American developer who doesn't understand our clientele, our customs, or our language?" Julien answered smoothly. "We've done our research, we've localized our plans, and we've brought someone who I don't need another interpreter." Lefebvre interrupted. "I need someone who thinks in our culture, not just translates words." Grace felt her chest tighten. Julien opened his mouth, but Grace stepped forward and spoke in fluent French. "Monsieur Lefebvre, permettez-moi de vous répondre, non comme interprète, mais comme une fille d'immigrant qui comprend le valeur des nuances culturelles." "Mr. Lefebvre, allow me to answer you, not as an interpreter, but as a daughter of immigrants, who understands the value of cultural nuance." The room went still. Lefebvre looked up sharply. Grace continued her tone, respectful but unwavering. "Vous savez ce qu'on dit à Marseille, un mot bien choisi vaut un mois de négociation." You know what they say in Marseille. A well-chosen word is worth a month of negotiations. Lefebvre blinked. The second investor, younger skeptical, leaned forward. "Where did you learn that proverb?" Grace smiled. "My mentor was Moroccan. He told me that after I botched a presentation back in college. I never forgot it." Then she turned to the presentation screen. Julien gave her a slight nod. It was hers now. She walked them through the project in French. Not stiff business school French, but living, breathing language. She referenced courtiers in Paris, where clientele preferred discreet elegance over gold-plated opulence. She cited data on luxury trends in Lyon and Marseille. She even joked in French about the difference between how Americans and the French define urgent. And every time someone raised an eyebrow, she didn't flinch. She countered with facts, local idioms, and empathy that couldn't be Googled. When Lefebvre challenged the layout plan, saying it lacked warmth, she replied instantly. "C'est exactement pour cela que nous avons inclus les cours silencieuses dans le design, inspirés des cloîtres du sud de la France, des lieux de calme, d'intimité, de conversation vraie." That's exactly why we included the quiet courtyards in the design, inspired by southern France cloisters, places of calm intimacy and real conversation. Lefebvre stared at her for a long beat. Then he nodded. Julien nearly dropped his pen. After an intense 90 minutes, the meeting ended. The investors left with handshakes and surprisingly smiles. The third investor clapped Julien on the shoulder and whispered, "Gardez-la. Elle comprend plus que vous tous." "Keep her. She understands more than all of you." When the door closed, Julien turned to Grace, still processing what had just happened. "You were supposed to interpret," he said slowly. "Not take over." Grace's eyes widened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." He stepped forward. "I've had this deal on the table for 6 months. Not one consultant, not one marketing firm, not even our French branch office could close it." He exhaled. "You just did. $60 million. Signed." Grace blinked stunned. Julien walked to the head of the table, grabbed a notepad, and scribbled something down. Then he held it up to her. "Grace Miller, cultural advisor and language specialist, JC Global." "That's not a joke," he added. "You earned it in that room." For a moment she couldn't speak. "Thank you," she finally whispered. "You did this," he said. I just gave you the room." And just like that, Grace Miller, the girl from El Paso, who once thought her voice didn't belong anywhere, had just proven on the 28th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper that she could own the room in a language most people couldn't even pronounce. And she wasn't done yet. Grace stared at the itinerary on her phone like it was a grenade. 2 months, Europe, 6 cities, 3 languages, 1 billionaire. Julian had handed it to her after the meeting, eyes burning with that same quiet certainty. "You were made for more than translating. I want you at the table in Paris, Berlin, Milan. You don't just understand language, Grace. You speak people." She should have been elated, but all she could feel was dread. Because this time the price wasn't exhaustion or self-doubt. This time, it was her mother. Back in Queens, the apartment felt colder than usual. Grace slipped off her blazer, the new name badge from Carter & Company still clipped to the lapel, and entered the kitchen. Her mother, Linda, was chopping carrots, slowly ignoring the oxygen machine beside her that wheezed with each breath. Grace placed the itinerary on the table, the one with the burn marks from years of late-night ramen and overdue bills. Her voice was careful. "Mom, Julian wants me to go with him. Europe, business tour." The knife hit the cutting board hard. Linda didn't look up. "So now you're traveling with a man you barely know." "That's where this is going." "It's not like that." "No." Her voice cracked. "You lied, Grace. You said you were just helping with one meeting. Now you're running off to Paris." Grace's chest tightened. "I didn't lie to hurt you." Linda's gaze snapped up. "You lied because you wanted out." Grace froze. The words felt like an open wound. "Every time you walk out that door, I don't know if you're choosing your future or leaving your family behind." Tears brimmed at the edges of Grace's eyes. "Why can't it be both?" "Because the world doesn't let it be both. Not for girls like us." Linda turned her back, one hand trembling against the counter. Grace wanted to scream, to say that every step she took was for them, that every deal she helped sign, every room she walked into, she carried her mother's sacrifice with her like armor. But all she could say was, "I'm sorry." And Linda said nothing at all. That night, the silence in their home was louder than any argument. 2 days passed. Grace didn't pack, didn't reply to Julian, just drifted between the walls of her life, more torn than ever. The dream was calling, but so was the weight of every expectation that told her to stay small, stay safe, stay home. Then a knock. Not hers. Julian Carter was standing at her door, wearing no suit, no ego. Just jeans, a hoodie, and a quiet intensity in his eyes. "Can I talk to her?" he asked. Grace hesitated. "She's not." But her mother's voice rang out from inside. "Let him in." The living room was dim. Linda sat by the window, wrapped in a thick quilt, her oxygen tank humming like a tired lullaby. Julian didn't speak right away. Then softly he began. "I wasn't raised by rich people. My father fixed air conditioners. My mother taught French in community college. I saw them work twice as hard for half as much, and they never once asked anyone to hand them a shortcut." He stepped closer. "But they believed in me, even when I didn't." Linda's face stayed still. "Your daughter," he continued, voice low but clear, "doesn't just know languages. She understands the world. She connects people who don't even realize they need connecting. And she's scared, not of the job, of letting you down." Julian paused. His next words landed like thunder. "Don't let fear shrink her into something she's not. Don't douse the fire she's finally let herself burn." Silence. Then Linda did something unexpected. She got up slowly, walked into her room, and returned with a small folded handkerchief, aged yellowed, embroidered with blue thread. She held it out to Grace. The stitches were faint, but still visible. "Go be seen." Grace's breath caught in her throat. Her father's handwriting, her father's dream. He'd passed when she was 15, but this was him speaking through fabric and time. Linda's voice cracked. "Your father always said the world was too small to stay invisible in it. If you're going, take this, so you don't forget where you came from." That night, Grace stood on her rooftop suitcase, by her side, heart pounding. 1 month ago, she was pouring burnt coffee and getting tips in crumpled singles. Now she was headed to Europe with a billionaire, a new title, and a linen square that weighed more than any crown. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was running away from something. She was running toward it. Rome was chaos elegance and pressure all packed into one ancient city. The Global Business and Culture Forum was being held in a centuries-old palace converted into a modern conference space. Marble columns, security checks, suits in every language. This was where the world came to close billion-dollar deals, behind polite smiles and sharpened words. Grace adjusted the gold conference badge, clipped to her blouse. Grace Miller, JC Group, Cultural Advisor. She belonged here. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. Julian had barely spoken to her since they landed. He was buried in prep meetings flanked constantly by Simon Hale, his longtime executive assistant, tall, smooth-talking with the kind of perfect hair and fake charm Grace had never trusted. Still, she stayed focused until the whisper happened. She had ducked into the hallway to take a call from the Paris team when she passed a side door slightly ajar. Two men were speaking in hushed tones, rapid Italian, then English. She recognized one voice immediately. Simon. The Carter proposal? Yes. She's too new to notice. Grace froze. If you deliver the numbers before Friday, our firm will withdraw. He won't know what hit him. Her heart dropped. Was this real Simon? Was selling them out? She leaned in, phone forgotten. Her breath hitched. The second man said, "How do I know she won't talk?" Simon laughed. Grace, she used to serve coffee. No one's going to believe her. Fury surged in her veins. Grace pushed open the door, but they were gone. An emergency exit slammed shut at the end of the hallway. She ran back to the main floor, pulse racing. Found Julian standing with two VPs. Julian, I need to talk to you. Now. He turned. Grace, can it wait? We go on stage in 10. No, it can't. He followed her to the edge of the lobby. She looked him straight in the eyes. Simon is leaking data. I heard him. He's working with competitors, said the Rome proposal is compromised. Julian blinked. What, I overheard him in the hallway? Grace, he said, voice dropping. That's a serious accusation. I know what I heard. His jaw clenched. Do you have a recording? No, but... So, you're accusing my most trusted assistant in the middle of the most important forum of the year with no proof, she faltered. You think I'm lying? He exhaled slowly. I think you're under pressure, and maybe not ready for this level of play. Those words hit like glass shattering in her chest. She swallowed. Wow. Julienne turned away. I have to get on stage. She didn't follow. For the rest of the day, Grace was invisible. Julienne never called on her. Simon smiled at her with that smug, poisonous calm. The presentation went smoothly, too smoothly. But Grace knew something was wrong beneath the surface. No one believed her. She was still just the girl from the diner. That night, Grace stood alone outside the hotel, watching tourists zip by on scooters, their laughter echoing through cobbled streets. Lang, Tuxian, Batkong. She had translated languages, bridged cultures, saved million-dollar deals. And yet the moment it counted, the moment someone needed to be believed, she was shoved right back into that same tiny box. Too new, too young, too brown, too poor. She stared at her phone. No missed calls, no messages, not even from Julian. The man who told her she spoke people had chosen not to listen. But she wasn't done. Not yet. Rome wasn't quiet that morning. Grace wasn't either. After a night spent replaying the betrayal in her head, she decided one thing. If no one would believe her, she'd make sure they couldn't ignore her. So at 6:14 a.m., she slipped into the side hallway where it all happened. She waited. And at 7:03 a.m., she saw Simon step inside again, like clockwork, with the same arrogant smirk and pressed collar. Grace pressed record on her phone voice memos app open and placed it inside her coat pocket. Moments later, she heard it. English, then Italian. Quick whispers, confirming times, deadlines, data drop after keynote. It was all there. This time, she had proof. 10 minutes before the conference began, Julian was backstage reviewing slides, his jaw tight, his mind elsewhere. Grace walked in, eyes blazing. You need to hear something. Grace. She handed him her phone and hit play. Simon's voice came through clear, calm, and unmistakable. As long as the files are uploaded by 2 p.m. JC Group won't make the merger. We'll miss it by 48 hours. Julian's expression didn't change at first. Then his brows slowly furrowed. His knuckles clenched. Grace didn't gloat. She didn't need to. This company's about to walk into a trap, she said softly. And no one would have stopped it. Because I was just the girl from the diner. Julian stared at her. Then for the first time in 2 days he said, "You saved us." Minutes later, the entire ballroom filled with business elites, world media, and government observers. JC Group's name was projected across a 50-foot screen. Simon stood beside the podium, notes in hand, mask still on. Until Julian stepped forward alone, he cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to address something critical." The room stilled. A breach in our internal chain was just discovered. Someone close to this company was feeding information to a competitor to sabotage today's deal. But thanks to someone with unshakable instincts, courage, and integrity, we found out just in time. Gasps rippled across the room. Julian turned slightly. "And that person is Grace Miller." Every head swiveled. Grace, stunned, stood frozen in the back until Julian extended his hand. Not an assistant, not a translator, but a cultural intelligence advisor, and the reason we're standing here with confidence. The crowd erupted in applause. Simon was already being escorted out the side door, his protests drowned out by the thunder of validation. Grace took the stage, but she didn't bow. She walked to the mic, looked out across the faces that once looked past her, and in flawless Italian, she said, "They told me I didn't belong here, that my accent, my past, my skin didn't match these rooms. But understanding people isn't about power. It's about listening when no one else will. And today we listened." The translator beside her didn't even bother, because the crowd understood every word. When they stepped off stage, Julian looked at her, really looked. "You were never small," he said. "They just made you feel that way." Grace exhaled. For the first time, not to hold back tears, but to release the weight she'd carried for years. And in her coat pocket, the embroidered handkerchief from her father remained, a silent reminder. She had been seen, and this time, heard. The jet touched down at JFK under a soft gray sky. Grace Miller stepped off the plane with a quiet heart, her coat wrapped tightly around her, and her passport stamped with countries she once only saw in textbooks. She wasn't the same girl who poured coffee behind cracked counters. And the world. It wasn't the same place she once feared didn't have space for her. Back in Queens, the walk from the subway felt different, lighter. She still passed the same corner bakery, the same graffiti-covered alley, but now they looked like the opening scenes of a life that had finally shifted gears. When she pushed open the apartment door, her mother was waiting. No oxygen tubes today, just her soft, weathered hands clasped on her lap, eyes glistening. Grace didn't speak. She didn't have to. Linda stood slowly. Then, in the gentlest voice Grace had ever heard from her mother, she said, "I'm sorry." Grace blinked, tears rising before she could stop them. "I was afraid," Linda continued, "afraid the world would chew you up and never see what I see. But I was wrong. You proved something bigger than both of us." She took Grace's hands and held them tightly. "You showed the world that knowledge doesn't come from zip codes, that brilliance doesn't wear designer suits, and that the girl who once dreamed from our rooftop could speak with the whole world." Grace let the tears fall. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," Linda smiled softly. "Thank you, baby, for never lowering your voice." 3 days later, Julian asked her to meet him at the same coffee shop where it all began. Grace walked in and smiled, same booth, same scent of burnt espresso. But now she didn't wear an apron. She wore confidence like a second skin. Julian stood, pulled out a chair, then handed her a small velvet box. Grace looked at him, eyes wide. "Julienne, it's not what you think," he grinned. She opened it. Inside was a polished, silver nameplate, a business card etched in steel. Grace Carter, Global Director of Cultural Affairs, JC Group International. Her hands trembled. "You're offering me a partnership," he said, "permanent and equal." She stared at him, heart pounding. "Why Carter? she asked, half smiling. Julian's eyes held something deeper now, something soft but steady. Because I'm not done yet. He dropped to one knee. Grace gasped, not because of the gesture, but because of what he pulled from his pocket. A delicate ring engraved with 5 phrases in 5 languages. You are home. You are heard. You are worthy. You are light. You are loved. She covered her mouth, her breath stolen. I didn't fall for your resume, Grace, he said. I fell for the way you made every language feel like truth. And I want to build a life where your voice is always part of the story. Tears blurred her vision. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Yes. She laughed through tears. To the job. To the ring. To us. He stood, wrapped her in his arms, and the diner full of strangers clapped like it was scripted. Months later, at an international summit in Morocco, Grace stood at a podium. Behind her, the JC Group banner stretched across the stage. In front of her, leaders from 40 countries waited, but she wasn't nervous. Not anymore. She adjusted the mic, then glanced down at the old embroidered handkerchief tucked in her blazer, the one that read, "Go be seen." She smiled, and then, in perfect French, she began. In a world that often measures success by titles, money, or where you went to school, Grace's story reminds us of something deeper. Real value comes from courage, character, and conviction. She wasn't born into privilege. She was underestimated, dismissed, even silenced, just because she wore an apron instead of a business suit. But the moment she chose to speak up, she didn't just translate words, she changed destinies, her own and everyone else's in that room. Here's the truth. Your background doesn't disqualify your brilliance. Your voice, your perspective, your lived experience, they all matter more than you think. The world doesn't need more perfect resumes. It needs more people brave enough to speak up even when no one's listening. So, tell us, have you ever been underestimated? What did you do? Drop your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate real strength, real people, and the voices that rise from the shadows.